Coach, hey, thanks for joining me today on this Simple Coach to Coach interview. Do appreciate you, as always, taking the time, especially as we're gearing up for the holidays, and I'm sure you're busy buying presents.
Presents are done. My wife and I have been on top of our shopping this year, so we did unveil getting a puppy for our children. I've got
Nice.
four girls, so we had to kind of plan ahead. We didn't, just go and get a
Did,
dog. I guess that's not a thing
did you
anymore. So,
did you get some ideas? Is that what I'm thinking? Did you get some
I mean,
ideas?
I think I've heard that puppies don't do what is happening over there. So I've
Yeah,
entered into some world of chaos from what I've also heard. So so we're in the process. That'll happen after the new year. So
so,
our family's pretty pumped
nice,
about the
nice.
excitement around that.
You're,
So yeah,
so you're basically, it's like adding a fifth and a sixth child.
I think I've heard that. So again, my girls have been asking for a puppy for
Oh
quite
my
some
gosh,
time. It
yeah.
finally broke me down. So
Yeah, yeah.
it'll
That's
be
awesome.
probably a fun and wild winter, but I
Yeah,
think it'll be fun. So
that's awesome.
yeah.
All right, so let's get to the matters at hand. Why don't you, without me prompting anything, why don't you give me a sense as to how you think your season went?
Well, it's a big question, but a good one. I think really well. I think it's always interesting about like the timing of the question.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like we've now had almost a month now to kind of reflect on the season and the year. And I think as time kind of goes on, I think as coaches we kind of start to, I don't know, be a little less emotional around it. Obviously, there's lots of emotion around it. I think the day after I probably had a different response, and a week after maybe a little bit different
Yeah,
as well. And so I think like anything, I think you deal with some of the, I don't know if grief is the right word, but some grief around the ending of a season, because it's obviously the ending of a year that, again, I think was mostly successful, but also just like the ending of careers,
yeah,
for you of kids that you've connected
yeah.
with. Again, we had some fifth years in the team as well, so just taking another layer of connection with those young men, the relationships that you build. So there is like this grief component that exists in the ending of the year, but also then just kind of like trying to like manage and trying to figure out, okay, what emotion should surround this.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone kind of on the outside is telling you certain things, and then you've got your own kind of internal working. So I mean, I think at the end of the day that's a long-winded response to no answer. Just I mean, overall I think super well, and I think if you look at kind of where we grew from 21 to 22, I think there's a great way of kind of just looking at kind of the areas that we mature, the
Mm-hmm.
areas that we were able to experience. I think anytime you can win your conference tournament,
Mm-hmm.
I think that shows a lot of growth in terms of just kind of where you were. We lost in our semifinal the
Yeah.
previous year, um, and I can think went through a lot. But I think this group really responded, and again, we didn't win the conference title, and so that was kind of a little bit of a disappointing moment. But I think our
Mm-hmm.
guys kind of recognized, that the opportunity to win the title and go to the national tournament again, I think was in front of us, and for us to kind of
Mm-hmm.
execute that at the end of the year, not in necessarily an easy way, for me showed kind of our growth as a team,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe got us back to again 2018, 2019. We were in the Elite Eight, and so give me a second here. So so to see us kind of go back into the national tournament, I think was a important moment for our team and our program,
Mm-hmm.
and even me personally to say like, all right, we can win titles and we can be in the mix and be a part of the tournament at the end. So
Mm-hmm.
um, mostly just excited to see our team just grow so much
Mm-hmm.
from 21 to 22. I think was maybe
Yeah.
the most exciting piece that I would share.
Is there anything that you would say really surprised you? I mean, was your expectation that they would grow this much, or are there any individuals that you were completely surprised by how they performed this year? Or
I don't know if surprised is the right word. I think, we always want to see growth in our players and development. We play, I feel like, a pretty passing oriented style, and so I think you need some important players to kind of play a factor in that. So for me, probably the one that is probably a little bit of an unsung hero outside of our team. Not a lot of accolades for him. Will Valentine's a kid from Los Angeles.
Hmm.
He played right in the middle for us, kind of as our six, our defensive midfielder. For me, he's and our program has always kind of been built a little bit on the tactical discipline of that player in particular, their
Yeah.
ability to be able to keep it for us, but then also to like stop counterattacks because we do
Yeah.
kind of play a higher line. He was a kid who's been super involved, started a chunk of games for us, through COVID year and into 21. Played a little bit higher up the field. I think, loves. I think he would probably prefer to play a little bit higher up.
Right. Yeah.
As like an eight, a little bit, likes to join into the attack, and actually scored quite a few goals for us in the previous years. Um, so it was maybe like a little bit didn't totally make sense for us to drop him back, but like um, his ability to just kind of navigate that position and just grow in that position throughout the year, it just allowed us to control lots of games where we maybe weren't able to do in the
Hmm.
21 season. And so for me, he was probably and again, I wouldn't say surprised, to be honest. I think, we've seen his quality, but our assistant coach described him as a wizard sometimes,
Hmm.
and he hopefully he watches this and now describes himself as a wizard. But like his scanning, and
Yeah.
his first touch and his understanding around the game and the use of his first touch was actually
Yeah.
quite impressive. And so just super happy with him. I think he ended up getting maybe honorable mention all conference,
Hmm.
which is always, kind of like, but also like was maybe like one of the key linchpins for like
Yeah.
how we like to play. So again, maybe someone that's not going to get the accolades,
Yeah.
but we're for me, he was again. There's lots of players I could probably highlight, but for me, he's the one who allowed us to control
Yeah.
lots of games through season. He just got better and better
Yeah.
throughout the year. So
I think there's a lot of teams that don't really use the CDM role well, right?
mhm.
And you could see it, and so anytime I hear of a kid who's playing in that role that acts as like that linchpin in how the team defends and attacks, like I love hearing that because that to me is the role of a really good CDM, and otherwise you're
Yeah,
basically wasting a body on just somebody to break up plays, you know.
yeah, yeah, and he just had more of and he's not a big kid, because sometimes
Hmm.
you have like kind of a bigger kid
Yeah,
there that
yeah.
can kind of just like, and obviously if you can find a big kid who can do some of the aerial stuff and have the
Hmm.
tactical and technical qualities to do what Will did, he's a little bit of a smaller kid, so maybe
Hmm.
some of the challenges we had, maybe dealing with some of the aerial stuff at
Hmm.
times, through a college soccer season, did kind of maybe play out a little bit for us sometimes, but for me, he was, and it
Hmm.
just his understanding of the game and his soccer IQ, and just for me was
Yeah,
really, and just also his intelligence to just apply some of the little tactical
yeah,
details that we would ask him to apply in certain games, and was just able
yeah,
to. We were able to sustain attacks a lot because of his reading of the game,
yeah.
and just was just really proud of his ability to kind of implement that. And he was a guy who
Hmm.
just like wanted to play. Coach, can I play?
Yeah,
Can I play? And again, I don't know exactly what his minutes were this year, but there was some times where he's playing 90 minutes in that,
yeah,
which isn't easy,
yeah.
physically, but
In
also
that
just
role, yeah,
learn to conserve his energy and
yeah,
know when to take a deep breath
yeah,
and resting defense. And yeah, for me,
yeah,
it was really awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Hey, let me ask you the boss's question. How would you assess your coaching this year? How do you think you personally did on the sideline?
Yeah, that's a good question. I remember
I
last
only
year.
ask good questions,
Well,
Coach.
well,
I
no, you're
only
good.
ask good
Yeah.
questions.
No, I'm not. I shouldn't even have to highlight your good questions because they're good questions. Yeah, I mean, I would say, The I remember in our call last year, I kind of shared a little bit just of the challenges of the 21 season was kind of one of my more difficult
Hmm.
seasons of
Yeah, that's why
lots
I'm
of
asking. Yeah,
lots of factors around that.
yeah.
Again, one of our, Bruno passing played a big part in kind of my own probably mental health and some of
Hmm.
that I think I was actually quite good this year. I think my energy and kind of just the standard that I held our group to. I think
Hmm.
I had a good mindset about just making sure that because we went through like a patch, I think, where we didn't win for like 2.5 weeks or something. Like we
Yeah.
lost with a draw, and then another loss, and then another loss, and then a draw. And so I think
Yeah.
for me, my ability to just kind of keep our mindset in a good place at that moment
Hmm.
was, I think I was able to do that this year versus other years. Um, Made some mistakes, through the maybe beginning of the scene, figuring things out as a team, but
Hmm.
was able to kind of also just kind of see those and just kind of like, I told our guys like, okay, maybe that one's on me, guys, because maybe we shouldn't have sat back, this late in the game to try and get a result. Maybe we should just keep being who we are. And, okay, if we're going to do that, let's do it in a different way.
Hmm.
And so just was able to kind of maybe get a little buy-in from the guys of just sharing, hey, yeah, maybe I did mess up a little bit here, and
Yeah.
that's okay. And so I think I had a good year. Again, I'm always reflective on that. Even like looking back at our national tournament game that we lost, I'm like, should we have kind of set up maybe a little bit differently for that game? Rewatching it, I'm like, if we had taken the chance there, now we're up 2-1, and
Hmm.
the game just changes in a moment, and then obviously we concede after being on top of them for a stretch, and how that moment just changes
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think overall, I actually think quite well, and I
Yeah.
feel like the group did really well. Even at this moment, just excited about the
Yeah.
group that we having come back, and we obviously graduate some really significant
Hmm.
players for our program. But also, I think the mentality of the group is, I think they are excited about their year, but also I think felt like, man, we could do more. And I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
a good
Yeah.
moment. That's a good moment for me to feel like the kids are in that moment as well.
Yeah.
Spent some time with my seniors recently and just kind of
Hmm.
reflected, and I think they feel like they've left us in a good place
Hmm.
with the trophy, in hand, with a national tournament appearance. And for me, those are such important foundations for kids to feel,
Yeah.
have that experience, and to know that they're capable of some things, and can we do
Hmm.
more. So I think, yeah, so I think
Yeah.
overall, I think actually quite well. Again, messed up and
Yeah.
made some mistakes, but also feel like our team played in a good way, moving. And I think I'm excited about that. So
Yeah. Well, it couldn't have been that bad since of sort of how the season went, right? So I'll
for
take
sure,
mistakes if I win the conference tournament and get to the NCAA's.
yeah.
Hey, what do you think? Just real broad, right? Because we'll get into a little bit more specifically. You know, just broadly, what do you think it is? The one or two things that you think, if we could correct for next season, we'll be in a better place. Is there anything like that? Obviously, you want to build upon where you came from, but is there anything that you think needs fixing or that you need to work on?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've probably, I know our team, we talk about it kind of, we're not a big team. We're not a big team. It's never
Mm-hmm.
been kind of um, an area that we are. I mean, even watching the Final Four and just the size of
Mm-hmm.
the teams,
Yeah.
is something that is quite impressive in terms of the athleticism.
Mm-hmm.
I actually don't think we lack athleticism. I think we just maybe lack some size.
Size.
And
Yeah.
so I think that can play a part in it. So I don't addressing size is maybe not necessarily, the answer. I mean, obviously you can do that, and we have size within our team, and so kind of maybe figuring out how we kind of address that. The aerial, we were
Yeah.
actually just meeting. We had an individual meeting right before we came, and just one of our center backs, who's not a big center back, and so tell him he's got to improve in some of the aerial
Yeah.
aspects. And you've seen our roster. We've got kind of
Yeah.
an international roster, and so
Yeah.
some of the cultural ideas around kind of the game, I think, is important for us to address, and just kind of recognize that, okay, maybe those areas aren't
Yeah.
as valued maybe where you're from. These
Mm-hmm.
are things that are happening at the D3 level,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
in the Final Four. And so, yeah, maybe kind of the aerial stuff probably is kind of the area
Mm-hmm.
that we've got to kind of address a little bit, and just improve on, and figure out ways organizationally, as a staff too, of how do we set up our team to defend
Mm-hmm.
those situations maybe
Yeah.
in a little bit better manner. But also looking back again from 21 to 22, I think we were able to improve on some of it. We gave up kind of some counterattacks and we lost some control of games. We didn't give up a lot of counterattacks this year, and so we've made
Mm.
some significant improvements there. Um, and then also maybe just being a little bit, um, we showed maybe some inexperience at times with regards to overly emotional sometimes in some games where, just having to really just kind of stay stable, in the game and not get, yeah, play out the game, right? The game is,
Yeah.
we're down 2-1. Okay, just play it out, right? There's lots of time still to go. How do we kind of still be who we are? Obviously, being up would be the goal, and that's better. And we play better when we're up because then teams have to
Yeah.
come out against us, and we can our possession can kind of create some problems for people. But so for me, those two kind of the aerial
Yeah.
stuff, and then just the emotional, and we're kind of
Yeah.
an emotional team, and I can be an emotional coach, which kind of creates its own challenge. But
Yeah.
just this idea of calmness,
Yeah.
um, and seeing again. Actually, we played Chicago and actually played them for me actually quite well. Uh,
Hmm.
but watching them almost have like no panic when they played us, and even just again watching them, and I watched them throughout the year. I watched them play
Yeah.
against teams that are similar. The Gustavus game, the
Yeah.
Elite Eight. They're down 1-0 to who was it? St. Thomas from
St.
Texas.
Thomas, and then they
And,
just
and
blow
show
it
their
open.
yep,
Yeah.
and show that even in the Final Four for me were
Right.
just so
Yeah.
impressive of just kind of didn't seem to get too up and too down,
Yeah. Yeah.
through the year, which for me is just is a testament to to Coach Stitch,
Yeah.
and also just their experience. They
Yeah.
just I felt like they were going to win it. I almost had an email drafted to Coach Stitch of like, congrats on winning the national championship and just being
Yeah.
for me being one of the most impressive teams all year and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
consistent and
Yeah. Oh
they
my
showed
gosh.
for me they showed their
Yep.
experience too, and
Yeah.
some of their players that had been there just they've been there. They know what that experience
Yeah.
is like, and in the Final Four is super special time and experience for
Yeah.
teams, and they I think probably knew that it was special, but also were the team kind of set up to win it all. So
Yeah. I will say that is definitely very true about Chicago, where they had this calmness about themselves and this confidence, this steely determination of, I know the result by the end of the game. I'm not going to sweat over the little ebbs and flows of the game. We're just going to keep doing what we do, and it will come out on top. And I think they showed that throughout the entire season. And I did watch your game against Chicago, and I think the tournament final against Loras, and there is. It's very true that what you said. Like, I did think at times you were getting caught up in things. Like, your team was getting caught up in, you said, the emotion of the game or whatever, rather than being like, I'm going to try to mitigate all the ebbs and flows and just sort of be who we are and play the way we are. And yeah, that could be, I didn't know why at the time. I mean, playing Chicago is a really hard thing. So, and Loris was good. So I get that. It just, you could see guys getting sucked into like you said, the emotional part of the
hmm
game where you could be like, man, if you were just calmer in these situations, you would have done better. You would have
yeah,
capitalized on something or what
yeah,
have you.
yeah. And again, it's an area that we need to grow, but it's also an area
Yeah.
we've grown too, right? Just
Yeah.
watching,
Yeah.
last year we conceded a goal and we would kind of fall
Yeah.
apart,
Fell
whereas this
apart.
year
Yeah.
maybe didn't have those
Yeah.
moments happen
Yeah.
as much, or just kind of
Yeah.
create that same kind of dynamic in the team. And so again, we showed a lot of growth. And again,
Yep.
but for me, again, if we're wanting to be, again, one of the top, then
Yep.
those are the pieces
Yeah.
that we just have to
Yeah.
sort it out and grow up. We're
Yep.
still it was super interesting. Our back line last year was almost all I think we started 4 sophomores with a sophomore
Hmm.
goalkeeper,
Yeah.
with a junior, defensive midfielder who, has extra eligibility if he wants. So
Yeah.
that group can kind of be together here for
A
a
while.
significant amount of
Yeah.
time. So does that kind of help?
Yeah.
You go through those periods and those moments and see how it goes well and how it doesn't go well. And so hopefully
Yeah.
we talk about it. So I think it's something that I think our players will
Yeah.
grow in, quite a bit.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, this is a lot more complicated, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, but who do you think's going to win the World Cup, the Men's World Cup?
it's funny. My daughters were asking me that this morning, which was kind of fun to hear them talk about that. And, you know, Morocco for me is like just kind of like so cool,
Yeah,
like just an awesome kind of story. And obviously they deserve to be there. I think the way they've defended is amazing.
yeah.
Um, I'm a, I probably lend my way to different ways of playing.
Hmm.
And so I think, like watching their mentality and the way they defend is just
Yeah,
is like for me is just amazing, and you can see it like the passion
yeah,
around it is
yeah,
amazing. So, and it's not like they just sit in and don't attack either. So I think that's kind of an impressive part
yeah,
around them. I think they can hurt you in so many ways. So for me, like the underdog is super cool. I think France is the best team. That's
yeah.
just my opinion. I think France is like just so, and you have Mbappe for me,
Oh my God.
but then you just throw in all the other weapons they have. I think is like
Yeah,
super tricky. But then I'm just a Messi fan as well, and just
yeah,
seeing. I don't have a great. I'm about to avoid this answer entirely. Messi, but seeing Messi win, it would be quite special,
yeah.
well. And then again, Croatia for me, Modric is
The
amazing,
bomb.
is awesome.
That guy is
What
the
an amazing
bomb.
midfielder. And I remember watching because they're down a goal in overtime,
Hmm.
and watching him like he did like a slide tackle on a
Yeah,
touchline in overtime.
yeah.
He's at 30, 37 years old, I
7 years
think is what
old.
he is. And to see him kind of, that's like a thing like a little kid does, like a youngster does, not a 37-year-old,
Veteran
professional,
guy. Yeah,
you know,
yep,
Ballon d'Or winner, right? Like that's just not. But to see that for me was like a moment. I'm like, oh my
yeah,
gosh. So,
yeah.
so again, I have no answer for you. I think France is the best team. So I think if you had to, I'm not a betting man, but I would say France.
Well, okay. Like I said, it was a lot more complicated 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So
Yeah,
everyone, I think, basically picked the wrong team and they're out. So of the people I've asked them,
the timing of the interview, like I said,
yeah,
is also
yeah,
important. So
yeah, yeah. Maybe I should have. We should have had this like the day before Saturday,
there
Saturday
you
or
go. Who do
Sunday.
you think?
Yeah. Um, hey, let's. I just have a couple the rules questions for you. You had five ties. I don't think any of those went to OT. No, those were all regular season ties. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, what are your thoughts on the overtime changes? Do you have any? Do you think it was a net positive, negative for the game?
Yeah, it's a layered, complicated question. I think there's I think there's some operational and logistical positives around it. I can just share like so in our league, and sometimes like we'll play double headers, like a men's and women's game,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's like just the fact that we may play a game after the women, and so
And the
they're
game's
not
going to
having
end at a certain
in
time.
the
Yeah,
game, and so there was some operational things that I really like and logistically just liked in
yeah,
terms of just timing and just
yeah.
so some of those things I really liked. I think from a physical and mental component, I think there was some positives around it, to
Mm-hmm.
not have to manage an overtime game, and then have to do that
Yeah,
turnaround. Again, timing, recovery, and time component and safety of the
yeah,
players, I think is continues to be
yeah,
something that
yeah.
I think should be at the forefront of the NCAA's mind. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
for me, I think like positives around that
Mm-hmm.
component as well. Um, I did think it just kind of drew out maybe some of the negative sides of soccer sometimes. And again, that they're part of the game. I think some of the time wasting and
Yeah,
some of the areas around that aren't for me like part of the best parts
yeah,
of soccer in general. And again, they're part of the game. So again, we could maybe make some arguments, especially at the highest levels. You're just seeing some of those kind of tactics
yeah.
come into things, and I felt like that was something that I saw a lot over the course of the year for
Mm-hmm.
teams trying to maybe get a draw.
Yeah.
And we were probably, maybe on the receiving end of those type of things
Mm-hmm.
versus us trying to get a draw.
Yeah.
It wasn't normally kind of our MO throughout the year, but um, again, I think, so I think those were maybe some of the things that I thought were or something that I think the NCAA's got to kind of be thoughtful of just kind of
Mm-hmm.
the time management of the game,
Yeah.
and so and again, it just makes like another thing that I think the officials are going to have to kind of work on, and
Yeah.
for me, it's already a challenging. Reffing a men's college soccer game is not an easy
Mm-mm.
is not an easy thing, and so I think
Yeah.
adding another layer to their what they've got to kind of adhere to, I think is tricky, for our officials. So again, I'm a soccer purist, so seeing some of these things and just playing the 90 minutes, I think I kind of, again, part of me likes it, but also I think psychologically, the team that's trying to get a draw does
Hmm.
do some things that are going to help them, in that
Yeah,
moment, and knowing a kid knowing they have to manage 7 minutes versus 27 minutes for me is a psychological
yeah.
boost that those teams are going to have. So, um, yeah,
Coach, let me ask you now that because it did, you sort of suggested it. Do you think like there were? Do you think like coaches, and again, not maybe not in your case because of right, you were there's very few occasions I think on your schedule where you were I don't want to say the underdog, but like the Chicago game, that's a tough frigging game, right? Like so, do you think guys came to play you and said, you know what, we're going to hold out as long as we can because if we can get a tie, we'll take the point.
yeah.
Do you think
I mean,
that happened?
I think it exists. I also think it probably exists more as the game goes on too. So
Mm-hmm.
again, you're not necessarily setting your team up to get a tie, but as the
Mm-hmm.
game goes on and it stays tight, and do you start to do some things that kind of maybe, and I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I actually don't think that's necessarily wrong too, right? Like,
No,
uh,
no, no. I just,
to be,
yeah,
but again, I think so. Some teams may set up to say, hey, we're away from home.
yep,
Oh man, we're not playing well. Oh man, this kid just got knocked out. Like,
yeah,
how do we manage to get a point? Let's not, okay, we may not win this game, but let's not lose this game.
yeah,
I think that definitely plays a part, and I think it's easier to execute that without the overtime, and
yeah.
so I think it
Oh,
becomes a
absolutely.
more
Yeah,
realistic kind of, way of still getting a point in a game.
yeah,
And so, I mean, we fought for some points too. I think we were down in Nebraska Wesleyan and scored with, 16 seconds to go or something.
mm,
Ended up being a super important point for us, in the grand scheme of things. But again, if we go into that and have 20 more minutes to
yeah,
play and score late, now what does that look like, over the
yeah,
course of 20 minutes, So
yeah,
um, yeah, so I don't necessarily think teams are like saying that is. I mean, some teams, like again, if you feel like you're so undermatched, like, hey, let's try and keep this tight and use our
yeah,
tactics and be smart and be
yeah,
slower in
yeah,
some of these areas. I think it's maybe not the best part of our game, the game that we love, but it is our
yeah,
game. And so
yeah,
how do we,
yeah,
show some maturity in those moments too? Yeah. So I mean, I think yes and yet, yes and no a little bit, right? I think some
yeah,
teams just get set, and again, all right, we're down a man. I'm gonna get a draw, right? Like,
yeah,
let's not lose this game because I'm now, we've got
yeah,
picked up a red card and now we've got some things to manage. So
yeah.
I think we're seeing some of those tactics come out, and again, not necessarily. Again, we can say it's negative tactics, but I just think it's tactics to try and get a point and keep.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't lose, but you don't win, right? And you just kind of can move on from that. So.
I think the only reason why I ask that really, but to me, it's like if you're a coach, if you're a good coach, and you're 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 making your tactical decisions based on facts on the ground, right? Like so you're on the sideline. It may be beforehand if it's that stark. Like you're looking at the two teams, you're like there's no way we stand a chance really to go up against whoever it is, right? You make just
Yeah.
tactical decisions based on that, right? And if you're in during a game and you're like, man, we lasted 60 minutes, 65 minutes, and we're getting throttled, but man, let's keep defending. What do we
Yeah.
do? How do we like that to me is good coaching, right? And I might not like but anyhow, the reason why I asked that is because everyone I spoke to last year before this all happened, everyone said, no, 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 we're going for wins. And I watched some of those coaches, and you're like,
Mhm.
I'm not sure you're going for a win, but that's
Mhm.
fine, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I
Yeah.
asked.
And I think, yeah, and I also think, you mentioned it, like the coaching, the quality of coaching, I think again at the
Mm,
Division 3 level and at the collegiate level for me just continues,
to grow.
continues to
Yeah,
improve. I mean, guys are
yeah,
guys will show up, again, maybe with a team that's not as strong as yours in terms of quality and talent,
Yeah.
and they're getting
But
results. And they're
tactically,
getting results and the organization that
yeah.
they have and the plan. And again, you still have to kind of like, have your athletes buy into that plan, your
Yeah,
players like execute the
sure.
plan, right? We all have plans, and if we don't
Yeah.
execute those, and so I think you're
Yeah.
just seeing that for me at a higher level, and again, I think it's mostly good. I actually think it's mostly good, that coaches are able to do it, and I think it's almost for us. And I'm saying this, and you said it, kind of a team that I feel like is typically on the top and pretty proactive,
Mhm.
and um, finding ways to break teams down, right? Finding
Yeah,
ways to
yeah.
game, right? So again, you can make some arguments. Well, okay, okay, you figure it out, right? You get the
Yeah.
goal. If you can't break us down, then that's your fault.
That's
That's
your
your
problem.
lack
Yeah,
of
yeah.
your lack of ideas and
Yeah.
stuff. And so for me, it's probably actually just encouraged me to again, figure that out. How do we beat a team who plays on a low
Right.
block? How do we beat a team that's
Yeah.
got numbers in the air? Okay, we gotta. If we only have one way of doing that, then that's gonna be, probably
Limiting. Yeah.
yeah, limiting. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
figuring out ways to create a new problem
Yeah.
that the team has kind of created for us by
Yeah.
by playing again on a low block and some different
Yeah,
things.
yeah. Yeah.
For me, I'm like, for me, it actually maybe excites me a little bit. 15 years into this, 20 years into the business of like, hey, there's new rule, which again, whether or not it stays or goes is not my choice, but it does have created a little bit of a new dynamic of how I
Yeah,
coach
yeah.
my
Yeah.
players and how I coach, the
Yeah.
way that we're going to do things. So
I like the chess match of it, the element,
I think
right? And I
so.
think it's attributed to something like that, this rule, the no OTs, but then, like you said, the quality of coaching, right? Like, yeah, you could have a lesser team. I don't mean this in a bad way. Like, you could have man for man a team that's not as good as another team, but man, if you can get your tactics down and everyone's bought in, like they become formidable opponents on any given day,
For
right?
sure.
And
Yeah, for sure.
so
Yeah.
hey, so the other rule thing is I've been talking just about this notion of adding time at like a week before the end of the before the season, so longer preseason, and then extending the season by a week on the back end. Um, what would your thoughts be on that? Forget the economics of it and all that.
Mhm.
Just from a soccer perspective, is that something that you would welcome if you had more time in preseason? Or
Yeah. I mean, as the assistant AD, the economics plays a
yeah,
part in this,
huge. Yeah.
obviously, from the men's soccer side of things. I think giving our kids more time
Hmm.
to just be able to, number one, acclimate. So, like a preseason that kind of doesn't just force them straight into things. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the hardest things. And we've even like played like preseason games like day two of preseason,
Yeah.
right? So like trained and you're just throwing basically your returning group out to see how things are.
Yeah.
Those aren't for me. For me, that's like too high of an intensity level too early.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
most Division 3 players and coaches just kind of the intensity of preseason is quite
Yeah.
significant, and so I think that would help in terms of just the acclimation process, and then extending this, the season. I think is we're so it's just game after game after game.
Yeah.
We barely train, in that time period. It's like game recovery, you know, pregame session, then game. I mean, I think that's a pretty normal routine actually for a lot of
Hmm.
teams. So figuring out having a little bit extra time
Hmm.
would be nice. I mean, Division 1 final was what last night.
Yeah.
So I think that extra week does play a. I mean, it does play a factor in kind of just how you're
Yeah.
able to kind of manage the year. Um, so, and I love games. Like we probably are on the high end of scheduling games.
Hmm.
So I think our players love playing games. I think there is some of that. Am I being unhealthy with our players? I don't know if that's fully accurate as well. But I think just again, if we're gonna do it like this and having some more time for our kids to
Hmm.
acclimate and then have some more time in between games,
Yeah.
I think would just be a better experience for our student
Yeah.
athletes.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
we're in the interest of our student athletes to have that, again, better experience, safer, like it seemed like a little bit of a no-brainer, but then you have to
Mhm.
throw into the economics of, cost of kids being in early. I don't think the kids being here late as big of a problem because most people are in finals into that mid-December time period.
Mhm.
So, but it is on the front end. The front end
Yeah,
can
yeah.
be a little tricky. So I'd be in favor of it. Again, is that going to pass, via
I don't know.
administrators is a whole nother.
That's your ball of wax, man. Like I just come up with these, or I just think of ideas like
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and you
I think most coaches would prefer
yeah,
more, more
yeah,
time in terms of like just what, being able to kind of schedule out a little bit better
yeah, yeah,
with that acclimation period
yeah.
plus, um, less time in between games or more,
There is
excuse me, more time.
something there is something about the preseason which is like right now, the way it's currently structured, that is sort of wrong, right? Like you're trying to protect the kid's health, but then you give them a week,
Yeah,
like or whatever it is, 9 days, whatever the number of days it is,
yeah,
and they're probably almost going through a shock, right? They're not getting acclimated. It's probably almost like a shock to their system because they haven't trained that hard for, unless guys are doing some serious club ball or something.
hmm,
They don't train that hard during the summer. So I remember me after a week and I'd be super fit. Man, I could barely walk, It
yeah,
was, shin
yeah.
splints and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
anyhow.
No, I mean, I just think that exists, right? And just in
Yeah.
terms of your ability to, to manage that. And again, you throw in the first year, the new,
Yeah,
players,
yeah.
like all
And
that
that
they're transitioning.
yeah.
And I've said before, even to, the expectations of our first years to come and play and be impact right away. I mean, it's almost like an impossible task.
Yeah,
New coach,
yeah.
new team.
Asking too much of
Yeah,
them,
yeah,
right? Like,
new
yeah,
new environment, all
yeah,
new style, new teammates,
yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. Like take out all the transitional pieces that they're trying to figure out just with being in a new school, right? Like all of those things are
First time being away from home, like all
sure
that stuff, all that
roommates,
stuff.
and just throw
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
pieces into it. And so I just think you're setting them up for. And again, should everything be determined by our first years? No, but I think we
N-
should be thoughtful of
Top,
all of
yeah,
the
yeah,
experiences of all of the
yeah,
students.
yeah. All right. So you ended 12-4-5, won the American Rivers Conference tournament. You did not win the regular season conference.
Correct.
But in the tournament, you beat a really good Loris in the final. And then you made it to the NCAAs, and then you lost to Wisconsin Eau Claire. So you have all this success, and obviously a season comes to an end when a season comes to an end. But I'm just curious, like, do you do you do you think it was that you met your match in Eau Claire? Like now that you step into the NCAA's, you're playing these different teams, or do you think it might have been something like you weren't ready for that level?
I mean, I think watching us celebrate our Loris championship was like just like a really emotional
Hmm.
celebration for our guys, and I think it was a big kind of a big moment. I think we had some guys who again, we hadn't won one since 19, just with like COVID and
Yeah,
some of that stuff. So it seemed like a while ago.
yeah,
And so I just think the emotion around, again, like our older group of just kind of getting us back to that moment. Some of our younger players never experiencing that, and it was actually so much emotion, after the
hmm,
celebration and that result. Again, super challenging game. I think showed again like a lot of like our growth in terms of just
yeah.
managing, a difficult game like that. And so was I remember again probably in being reflective, right? Like was that kind of where we, kind of hit our mark, maybe a little bit. And I look at also the Eau Claire game. They were kind of a team that also probably just matched us in some ways that were going to create
Uh-huh.
some problems for us. Good size, good athleticism,
Yeah.
and so created some problems, with that. We play a high line, and they had a forward who obviously could create some problems for us in that way, and he did, and he had a good game against us,
Hmm.
and so yeah, I mean, I think again, I look back at the year, and I look back at that game, Eau Claire, and again, I've rewatched it a couple times. There's some just there was also we also played the way we typically play, which I again like, but also were they able to kind of sniff out some of the weaknesses that we
Mm.
had? They did, but it's margins. I feel like last time we
Yeah,
talked,
yeah,
margins are, so
yeah.
important,
Big.
like,
Yeah,
minutes ago in the half, ball comes out, and we're on, we're putting good
yeah.
pressure on them, and Marcos, our striker, hits a volley that hits the underside of the
So,
bar and bounces
yeah,
down,
bounce
and we're
in.
like,
Yeah,
just where's the techno? Here's the goal line
yeah,
technology, which just doesn't exist.
yeah,
I think I rewatched it like multiple times. I think maybe it is in, but it's like
yeah. You're
it's such.
slowing it down to a
Oh yeah,
point
for
where it's
sure.
just a blur.
Exactly. And so like again, the margin, if it's
Yeah,
2-2 there, and
yeah,
I think we pushed to get the goal in the second half and just kind of weren't able to kind of muster enough
yeah, yeah.
quality in that moment. And again, like, and one of our, our attacking midfielder gets injured with
Mm.
20, 35 minutes to go. So there kind of
Mm.
plays another kind of someone
Yeah,
who could probably unhinge kind of a team that's sitting
yeah,
back.
yeah,
But also they were good, to give testament to also to them, right? Like it wasn't just
yeah.
us. They created some serious problems and played to their strengths, and their strengths probably again were kind of maybe exposed some of our weaknesses. And so again, it's at this moment in reflecting it, again,
Hmm.
I may be disappointing, to maybe not progress because I think again um, we had enough quality to kind of progress through.
Hmm.
I don't think we're overmatched. I don't think we were. Um, I don't think the occasion was too much for us. But the game played out the way it played out,
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and sometimes that's what happens in the game. And, we weren't able to, for me, chasing games in national tournament is not the recipe
It's
for
not the
success.
rest of
Nope.
success. No, no.
And so, and
Totally
unfortunately,
agree.
that's kind of how it played out. And it's,
Yeah.
2-1 and, not able to get the equalizer, and again, I think we battled and tried to figure out some solutions and kind of create another problem. But for me, Eau Claire was good in managing,
Yeah,
what we
yeah,
threw at them, and props to
yeah.
them, props to Casey. Casey's a good guy, well coached team. I think they're going to be a team that you're going to probably see, you know,
I
going
liked them.
forward.
I thought they're a little bit, you know, I think you're definitely the more of the ball skill team of how you move the ball, and I think they're a little bit more direct. But I liked the way they played. I thought they were, um, again another team where they're effective. Everyone's bought into it, right? They're not, they when they step on the field, they know what their responsibilities are. Really disciplined that way.
Mhm.
So I'm
Yeah,
not surprised. I mean, honestly, I wasn't surprised by the score. I'm just curious from your standpoint.
yeah. And again,
Um,
just respect to them and
yeah,
respect.
yeah,
No disrespect at all to
yeah,
them, and just again, we play the way we play, and that's going to be some of the things. And again, how do we adjust that? Maybe in some, even again, my mindset of like, were we a little naive, with
yeah,
kind of how we
yeah,
played with, with the big kid up front,
yeah,
and
yeah,
should we have done some things that would have created some more problems? And I think some of it is yes. The answer I maybe should have done some things, but also like if we score, then I'm a genius, and we're
yeah,
kind of stuff. So I just
yeah,
think
yeah.
we're
If that
constantly
shot goes in
oh yeah, yeah.
by Marcos,
Marcos.
right,
Mhm.
like that, you're talking singing a different tune right now,
Yeah.
right?
We
Just
got
based.
into some for me. We got into some great positions, especially in the
Yeah,
first half. We were,
yeah,
for me, in the positions that we love, that like we have
yeah,
set out as a team and programmed to try and get
yeah,
into, but just didn't execute in
yeah,
those moments. Bad final
yeah,
ball,
yeah,
runs weren't correct, et cetera.
yeah.
Right, and again, it wasn't
Step
to a lack of
away,
effort
right?
from our
Yeah,
kids, So
yeah,
we
yeah,
just weren't able to execute at as
yeah.
high a level we needed to.
Speaking of Marcos, you had some guys who really stepped up. Marcos, Will, Overberg, and then a guy I liked is another Spanish dude, which again, not knowing what his team affiliations are, I like him right now. So Javier Pastor
Yeah,
Valls, yeah,
Pastor. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, how important were guys like that to your overall success? And you spoke to your CDM as well. Like you spoke
yeah.
about your CDM. Like how important were those guys to
I mean,
to
super
what you did?
important to the way we score. Marcos for me was just like such a key.
He's an
kind of figure
All-American,
for
and
us. Yeah,
he'll be my best 11. I thought that guy
yeah.
was spectacular
I
this
thought he
year.
was good. I thought he was so
Yeah.
good this year. Kind of what he does outside of kind of on the ball stuff was actually pretty impressive. His ability to
Hmm.
press for our team and his fitness levels were quite outstanding. He had a hamstring issue going into the season, and so that was always something that was kind of on his mind, and he just kind of kept going. And he, for me, was quite strong at the end of the year. Scored important goals for us all year. Will Overberg was that kind of that guy who could just stretch and
Hmm.
just kind of put a level of fear into every team we played. You kind of had
Hmm.
to worry about Marcos because he can just kind of pop it into some different
Hmm.
spots and into midfield, and again allows us to maybe kind of play just like our six, but allows us to kind of play in defeat and kind of do some of those things. But Will was, so dangerous, and good in the box. So those two for me, and then for me, Javier Pastor is like maybe one of the best players I've ever coached in terms of like just talent and quality.
And
His
young. He's young
young
too, right? He's a
or
sophomore. Yeah.
and just can he can run past you, he can beat players.
Hmm.
His passing is quite impressive. Set pieces he's created some good problems for the opposition. That's an area that we're going to look to grow. So for me, like just all three and their ability to kind of play off of each other, and they learned how to do that. And so
Hmm.
obviously, Marcos graduates, with fifth year, and
Yeah.
Will has they lots of guys have that COVID year, and so whether or
Yeah.
not, Will decides to kind of continue, and then Javier will be a junior for us. So I think,
Yeah.
we graduate some firepower for sure, and so
Hmm.
again, that's kind of something that we'll have to address moving forward. But we also have like super quality, some young players, some kids who didn't play as much, who are just waiting for their Marcos was a key figure for us for 5 years really, and so kids waiting in the wind, for their
Hmm.
opportunities, and it's not often that I took him off, knowing that we needed to score a goal. So,
Hmm.
so some younger guys like, hey, when is my chance? And obviously that chance happens now. So.
Yeah. Yeah. You're gonna have to explain it. I still don't understand how a Spanish pipeline ends up at Luther. That's
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something I think that people ask a lot actually around around our program. But
not
for
that I'm
me,
complaining. I love to see it. Right? There's
no,
some
it's
great ball
and
players coming.
actually coaches, around even around the region, around the country have asked that
Hmm.
similar question. But it's for me, it's Luther, right? It's not less. It's
Yeah.
less about me. It's less about men's soccer. It's Luther,
Hmm.
and Luther has like a rich history of international students.
Inner students. Yeah.
So it's 8 to 10% of our student body is international.
Yeah.
That's been the case really for quite some time, right? This
Yeah.
isn't some like, kind of new initiative
Thing.
that the
Yeah.
school
Yeah.
has had. This has been an important aspect of our college and our mission. And I'm talking about, 50, 60 years, right? And so,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that's it's embedded into the mission of Luther. And so, um,
I mean, that's great for you, right? Because
for sure.
it's not like you're doing. I don't. I'm sure you're talking to these guys before they come, but it's almost like they come to your door, and you're not the one having to go travel the world to watch these kids, right? Or you're not
I
doing
mean, there's a
something
common.
very
I would
intentional.
say it's a combination of
Yeah.
me now working with our international
Yeah.
admissions office and just having discussions
Yeah.
around that whole recruitment process. But I do some international recruiting. I probably don't do it nearly like some scholarship programs. But I've been to Germany, I've been to Brazil,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so those are areas. The prep school kind of
Yeah.
component
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
Northeast is very international, and so
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
played some
Taft is
yeah,
really
Taft,
international. Yeah.
Kiski's kind of been one of our big ones, kind of in
Uh huh.
the Pennsylvania area, with
Hmm.
some of our Spanish kids, and so, and just like anything, once you recruit a student, right, to be at your school, just like it would be with domestic kids, like they're all talking to each other. Hey, like
Yeah. Yeah.
what's Luther like? Oh, do you like
Yeah.
it? Oh, what's the coach like? Hey, what's the environment of the student athlete, right? The
Hmm.
community, et cetera, et cetera. They just kind of, and then
Yeah.
that happens, when we have a kid from Minneapolis, right? And we've got this
Yeah.
kid from Minneapolis playing for,
Yeah.
Minneapolis United, and now it's, hey, my buddy played there. No, what's that experience like, et cetera,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me,
Yeah.
it's actually not as different as people think, uh,
Hmm.
but for me, it's also is part of our mission of Luther, Luther
Yeah,
College. Again, I'm
yeah,
not talking about athletics or soccer,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
embedded
yeah,
into who we are as an institution. And so for me, and again, I probably didn't, when I got here 15 years ago, that's probably not how I envisioned it. But as I
yeah,
learned, every place has to learn what their strengths, are in the recruitment world and which students that they can get. And
yeah,
again, if you had told me, that our roster is going to be heavy Spanish and Brazilian and I mean again we're kind of all over the world now, but those are probably our two
big ones.
biggest areas. But we've made some headway in Germany as well, and so those are again there's some intentionality around me, but that's also just kind of working with our international
Yeah,
office
but there
too.
might be intentionality, but it's not you building that pipeline, right? Like it's the school's mission, like you said, the school's mission to go to get kids from overseas to
Mhm.
come to Luther.
And
So,
then
and Luther has to be a destination, as you said, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
if it's not a destination, the kid's not going to go there. It doesn't matter how many times
I
you
think it's
go over there.
again, it's a combination of everything that
Hmm.
you're, speaking about. And again, I have to create my relationships with, with countries, with different,
Hmm.
organizations
Yeah,
that
yeah,
are
yeah.
kind of supporting kids coming to the U.S. And so,
Hmm.
there is that component, right? But
Hmm.
it can't be without the
Yeah.
support from the institution as well. They
Sushi.
have to,
Yeah.
yeah, they have to meet all of
The requirements.
the
Yeah.
requirements
Yeah.
to come to
Yeah.
Luther, and
Yeah.
so and if they don't, they're not here,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's the same kind of process
Yeah.
that a lot of our domestic students go through.
Yeah. All right. So there was a stat that stood out to me, and I'm just wondering. I mean, is it this? You had your average shots per game was almost 19 a game. So you took 19 shots a game, and you only allowed seven. And while I was looking at, like, hey, your team wasn't just about scoring goals. You also had something about locking down your back. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that? You mentioned a little bit about how it was such a young back line and
Mhm.
your
Yeah,
CDM
I
was
mean, I
young.
think, yeah, I mean, I think there's two aspects to that. I mean, ultimately, it's just about control, and it's kind of like the big
Hmm.
piece that we talk about. And so we talk about kind of controlling the game as much as possible. So again, controlling. For me, most people think of control as like just the ball-oriented
Hmm.
piece, right? And I think the 19 shots for me is a product of being in, strong control of the game, creating opportunities. We're not a
Yeah.
team. Our shot chart for me is very um, oriented to the box. So we're not a team that just kind of shoots from everywhere. That's just kind of not the nature of that. So
Hmm.
to still have close to 20 shots a game for me also shares the quality of the decision making that our players make. It's something again that we
Hmm.
talk a lot about, in terms of shooting choices, right? I think
Yeah.
those is important to just not. Again, and I know lots of people argue with me, and I have that actually happen a lot. Like, so if you don't shoot, then you don't score, right? Which I totally, believe in as well. But I think the higher level you get, it's about creating quality opportunities. So I think that
Opportunities. Yeah.
that for me is an important aspect. The limiting shots also probably again goes a little bit back to like my Will Valentine
Hmm.
comments of just our
Yeah.
ability to stop counterattacks. For me,
Hmm.
was probably the area that we grew the most, and we controlled a lot of teams' counterattacks,
Hmm.
which was really important. With the way we play, if we're going to play higher up the pitch, you're exposing lots of space behind you, and so your
Yeah.
ability to control those moments, I think, are really important. And we did
Hmm.
just a much better job.
Hmm.
And I think, I mean, even we gave up 7 shots, but I think it was even less shots on goal. I think it was like just that three, which
Hmm.
is crazy good like team defending.
Team defending.
And so, and how do we, but also I think we conceded almost one of three,
Uh huh.
and so, for me, it's like learning how to kind of manage some of those other aspects. And of those three, how big of those chances were
Hmm.
those three, right?
Yeah.
Like, were they one
Yeah.
on one with our keeper, which we did, concede? Were they, a super, big, were we conceding in those three really big chances? And so how do we, again,
Hmm.
limit that? Because I would even say we even gave up too many, and
Yeah.
so, but I think it does show that, those statistics for me are just like a product of kind of our style, a
Yeah.
product
Yeah.
of what we
Yeah.
are trying to do, product of the control moment. So again, we're, like that is a product of kind of the way we're
Yeah.
trying to do things. And I would say, can we improve? Can we improve?
Yeah.
Obviously, create more opportunities and
Yeah.
concede less opportunities, right? Is
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
be some of the goals that we have moving forward.
Yeah.
So,
That's what I look at. I kind of, uh, I've said this. I tell my kids literally, like, you know, I tend to look at it like how you play creates an outcome. So if you play good soccer and you do these things, it leads to better outcomes. So the better you could be playing that game, don't worry about the wins and losses because ultimately your output is going to show, right? And so you always want to play good. You always want to move the ball. You want to get yourself into dangerous spots. And so I look at those stats as just that. Like, it's not because you took 19 shots in a game. I'm sure there were shots that were like outlandish, right? And that's the nature of stats. But when you take 19 shots in a game, more than likely your odds are that you got them on frame. A good chunk of those.
Yep.
Whereas if you only allow 7, a good chunk of those are probably on frame. So, like you said, half of the ones that you allowed were on frame. And so
Yep.
that's the way I look at it. Like, what is it? What is it your team is doing, and sort of what are these results that you're creating? And that to me is impressive, you know,
Yep.
because
And again,
you'll watch games, you watch D3 games, right? Like there are
yeah,
teams that just don't shoot, you know,
yeah,
like or they don't put themselves in a position to shoot, and
yeah.
so
And
yeah,
I think, yeah, and again, I think it's a byproduct of what we're,
yeah,
trying to do with our guys. And, again, I think you just see, for me, those stats just do say kind of like sometimes some dominance that can exist
yeah,
in the way that we play. And so, again, I'm mostly just, I've got some ideas that I think are good, and and it's about the players being able to execute, those
yeah,
ideas. And that's always, just see our players kind of get those outcomes, for me is props
yeah,
to
yeah,
them and props to their ability to execute that.
yeah,
And they're good players, and I always say good
yeah,
players apply the
yeah,
information that they get,
yeah,
so.
yeah. Hey, what are your plans for this spring? Like, do you have anything sort of to focus in on, or do you just sort of, hey, let's just get in under, play as much as we can?
No, we use our spring season as just really important preparation for the fall. So
Mm,
we attack it with a pretty good plan. I think, our staff and I are still kind of trying to figure out kind of what is our plan. Obviously, we graduate some significant
yeah.
firepower, and so it's kind of funky. Our team probably shifts a little bit in terms of
Mm,
experience now towards the back line.
mm-hmm.
So will we, kind of address some things, from that regard. So we'll kind of put some of those ideas in play, but
Mm-hmm.
it's, for me, it's a really important 5 weeks, right? To
Yeah.
just set that stage. We talk about it, I think, even in their off-season meet, these end of the year meetings. Like, guys, this spring season is really important for you to kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
establish yourself
Yeah.
again, because Marcos is graduating. Like, you get an opportunity as
Step
a
in.
to
Yeah.
step in here in 5 weeks, and there's no new prospects, because
Yeah.
that's what we're doing as well, is trying to
Yeah.
find some players to address those needs as well. But they're not here yet, so
Yeah.
this is your chance. And so I think it's a kind of an energizing moment for our players. I think especially in the D3 world, like they kind of have this time away from the staff in that way, which I think can be a
Mm-hmm.
challenging cycle, but I think also sometimes it's a good cycle, right? They have some
Mm-hmm.
away from the intensity, but also and train and do some things together as a group, and but then they kind of almost want their coach back in front
Mm-hmm.
of them to kind of
Yeah.
help that supportive piece. So
Yeah.
yeah, we do. We go up to, what we've kind of created a tradition, to go up to Minnesota, and we actually play a couple games in Minneapolis. It's only a couple
Mm-hmm.
hours from here, and then we go to a Minnesota United game. So that's kind of become our kind of a little bit of like our spring
Mm-hmm.
events. Play games, do an alumni events, and then go to the pro game that night.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
So we've kind
nice.
of made it a
Yeah. Yeah.
tradition. So,
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of
Very cool.
there's quite a few community member, a lot of alumni and community members are kind of from the Minneapolis area. So we kind of
Yeah.
get this kind of big soccer day,
Nice.
and so it's obviously a cool opportunity. We normally play like a USL2 team.
Yeah.
Minneapolis City is kind of the team that we've played in the past, so it's like a super competitive game.
Yeah.
We typically play Northwestern, who's another Division 3 school, and so we just
Yeah.
2 games, lots of kids play. See how we've grown from the 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Culminate with a Minnesota United pro game.
Nice.
So it's just a good experience and fun for
Yeah,
everyone.
yeah, yeah. That's a great. I love that. Love
Yeah,
that idea of making it into making your spring into something meaningful, right? Like for your
yeah,
program on a whole bunch of different
yeah,
levels.
yeah.
Hey, last question for you, and I'll let you get on with your day. Um, including sending me that wonderful looking Nike jacket you're wearing, Norse Soccer. Yeah,
Yeah.
XL. Hey, what's your, just looking out into the future for next year, what's your recruiting class look like? And I'm curious, with the making the NCAAs, winning the tournament, do you notice the type of player that is interested in Luther? Has that changed at all because of this success, or does it get you on more people's radar than might otherwise not have?
Um, yeah, I mean, recruitment's, going well. Kind of we're in the moment. We're probably get commitments kind of more later in our
Mm-hmm.
process than some. So to just kind of answer your question, and we're kind of up and running, in
Mm-hmm.
St. Louis this next weekend at ECNL event. And so, yeah, so kind of in the process, and that's pretty normal for us. I, I don't know. I mean, I think it just changes my credibility around my messaging, I guess, is
Mm-hmm.
that, I think that's the difference with winning some championships and going to the national
Yeah.
tournament. And so I think the one thing, if someone can kind of look at us, and I don't know if everyone does, is that this isn't just kind of like a one trick pony, right? There's
Yeah.
just sustained success,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
You're
obviously
not doing this every year, right?
yeah,
Like
and
it's
again, we
not
went
that.
down like
Yeah.
21 a little bit, but even down
Yeah.
was we still had double figure wins. We're still conference, in the conference playoffs, right?
Yeah.
So, our standard, I think we still had three all region guys, right? Like, so it's
Mm-hmm.
not like our down year was different than what a lot of people would say, but it was for us. And so I think, so I think it just changes the messaging. I don't think people are seeing us when go to the national tournament
Mm-hmm.
and droves of prospective emails are coming in. I think
Mm-hmm.
it just help um, as people are just looking at things, is that this is the experience that you're going to get. This is probably an experience that you're going to have. If that's important to you, then I think you should look at us. But I think
Mm-hmm.
I take a pretty confident approach to who we are. Luther is not for everybody, and I
Yeah.
don't assume it's for
Yeah.
everybody either. And so we do have for me, some of like the strengths of where we are is amazing place to be, but also it's not for everybody, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we're gonna a small town Iowa is not gonna tick the box for a lot of kids. I always say it's not like a sexy option. I don't think Luther is like a sexy option for
Uh-huh.
kids. I don't think it's like this glit and glam, but I also think what we provide is an experience that is super meaningful, has tons of substance, is going to be an experience where you can do super well academically, meet amazing people, and then obviously play at a high level. And so,
Yeah.
um, again, it's not for everybody, and so, um, you know, I wouldn't say people are beating down the door, to be at a place like ours,
Uh-huh.
but also like the kids that do come here obviously are super super talented and
Committed, right?
what we do, and
Yeah.
so and they know that, and I share that in the recruitment process of like what they should expect and what should I expect from them, when
Yeah.
they arrive here. And so yeah, I mean, and again, it's a amazing school, great education, and obviously an opportunity to play, for me at an elite level, and to play for a coach who's been around. Again, I've got
Yeah.
15 years
Yeah.
of experience. I'm not a new guy, but I'm also I feel like a great energy and experience around
Yeah.
providing
Yeah.
an experience for our players. So
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Coach. This was awesome, as it always is. The lighting in your office looks, again, I mean, you're getting professional
props
here.
to my dad. Props
Yeah,
to my
yeah,
dad.
yeah. Props to him.
Thinking
We'll have,
Jeff.
we might, the next time we talk, we might have to have it like a three-way, and we could talk about like, hey, get stories about you, right? Like
I'd
just,
actually be. I think that you got something to that. You got something to that. I'll have to see. He loves our. So we brought him on. I didn't probably tell you this. He went on our opening weekend
uh-huh,
trip. So he
uh-huh.
he loves Luther soccer.
Yeah, yeah,
Obviously follows me, and follows what we do. And so I brought him on the weekend trip up to Green Bay. We played St. Norbert's and Lake Forest. So he
uh-huh.
was on. He got like the full nitty gritty experience of a Division 3 sport. Like
Yeah,
probably not as glit and glam as everyone thinks. So,
yeah.
just super awesome to we talk all the time about the team,
Yeah,
and he's got his own response about kind of what that looks like, and he's been super
yeah,
influential in my
Yeah.
My ambitions, but just his support, over the years
Yeah.
is quite
Invaluable.
amazing. Yeah,
Invaluable.
invaluable. So
It's great. I love hearing how connected you are to your dad.
yeah,
That's
so
just,
so I'd fully
that's just
support
awesome.
a three-way
We could
conversation.
totally, we could totally do that. I
That'd be
am,
kind of
I
cool.
am
Maybe a kind of a
next time.
cool new way, right?
Yeah. And like I said, we won't talk to you. We will talk about you.
I
How
assume
awesome.
you'll like be muting me the whole time. Wait, I
Yeah,
thought you did
we
this.
don't want to
So,
hear from you now. And that'll be the video that goes viral. Like I'll
there
get
you
like
go.
a million
There you
views.
go.
That's awesome. All right, Coach.
Happy holidays, Paul.
Yeah, you too. Enjoy. Great Christmas. You and your daughters, your wife. Like
Yeah, thank you.
I wish you all the best.
Yeah,
And
thanks for all your work. Thanks for all your work with Division Three soccer. I
yeah,
think it's super cool. Just a
thank you.
fun. You've just added just again some energy and some fun around,
Trying.
the sport that the sport and the division that we're a part of. So
Yeah.
appreciate your work and super cool.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks. If you like this show, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. You can also find me on anti-social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks. This is a message from my Chief Marketing Officer. I think this keeps him happy.